Hey, everybody. Welcome to the CrossFit Edwardsville Community Podcast. Super excited to have you with us today. In this podcast, we really want to kind of meet and get to know more about our coaches here, our CrossFitters here at CFE, as well as our local community in the Glen Carbon Edwardsville area, the Glen Ed area. And this is really an opportunity for us to create an avenue for those coaches, those community members, as well as local business owners to kind of share their stories and learn more about them, learn about their business a little bit, learn about the characters we have here at the CrossFit Edwardsville community. And I'm your co-host of the podcast here. My name is Dallas Amston. For those of you who don't know me, I am the founder of the Men of Faith and Fire movement, hashtag Men of Faith and Fire, and I'm the host of the new podcast of that same name. And really, what I want to do is I work a lot with Christian dads who are kind of battling burnout, want to help them get back on point and on fire in their faith, with their family, and in their business. But with us today is two of our coaches as well. We got Coach Kelsey with us here. Let me go ahead and hide this so everybody can see you. What's up, Coach Kelsey?
Hey, Dallas. I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. We are getting to know you so well. And I'm
super well.
Yeah, I mean, we already know that you're a wife, you're a mother, you're a nutritional therapy practitioner, strength coach, regenerative farmer. For those of you who don't know Kelsey's business, though, she is the founder of Ignite, Nourish, Thrive. And she runs a health coaching practice where she kind of shares her continuing journey to balance living with multiple sclerosis, being a wife and a mom, and really honestly living a radically authentic life. You're responsible, Kelsey, for hundreds of jaw-dropping physical, emotional, and relational transformations in people who've worked with you. You kind of help dial them into their healthy eating habits. So glad to have you here, as always.
Yes, it's always great to be here.
Awesome. And then, of course, guys, you know him. He is the founder. He is the CEO at CrossFit Edwardsville. Greg Skelly, or as we like to call him, Coach G. Skell, husband, father, doctor of physical therapy. Man, you spent the last 18 years of your life kind of learning, practicing the art, the science, the psychology of nutrition for those people who are looking to feel better, perform better, look better, all the things. You want to look good naked, talk to G. Skell. Not about actually the naked part, but just looking better.
Although I wouldn't say no if it happened.
Oh, wow. I'm going to make sure to let Dan Yarger know that one. So
he already knows. He and I have had this conversation.
That is risky.
Not the first time.
So for those of you who don't know as well, G. Skell actually did competitive CrossFit performance year after year. I mean, you're close to 40 years old. You've maintained a sub 10% body fat for a huge chunk of your adult life. But really what he's done, everybody, is he's kind of channeled his own best practices into helping hundreds of CFE CrossFitters over the years break through their barriers that hold them back and really help them live their best lives. And I can attest that I'm one of those people that he has helped really start to turn my life around. So, G, welcome to the podcast, my man.
Hey, good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So we kind of peeled this one apart a few episodes ago. We talked about nutrition specifically, and Coach Sean was also a part of that conversation. But really, I wanted to dive a little deeper here with you because, Kelsey, you had brought up this idea in that conversation of when we talked about nutrition, there's kind of two groups of people. There's abstainers and there's moderators. And that really is something I think when we talk about it, nutrition specifically, that's a really great conversation point. So I'm going to kind of let you lead a lot of the answers here, and G. Skell may jump in every now and again. But what is, when we're talking about nutrition, give me a quick 30,000 foot view. What is an abstainer? What is a moderator?
So the abstainer and moderator idea, and I want to give credit where credit's due. This idea is from Gretchen Rubin. I don't know if you guys follow Gretchen Rubin or not, but if you don't, I recommend it. She is a sort of a guru in the habit space. Like she talks a lot about how to make habits, how to improve happiness. I know that she has an official title, but it's escaping me right now. So buy her books, listen to her podcast, get on her email list, whatever. They're awesome. And I use a lot of her personality tests in my practice because they are very succinct and quick and tell us a lot of information. So an abstainer and a moderator gives us two different personalities that tell us how we prefer or how our personality best lends to making changes. And those two options we have are moderate change or more moderate changes, a little bit of blurry lines, but you do well without very strict rules, versus an abstainer has to have very clear removal of things that may trip us up. And in the nutrition space, that usually means that a moderator has to have a little bit of off-plan foods or a little bit of wiggle room, or however you want to describe that, to be able to sustain and do well with something. An abstainer, on the other side, if they have those foods, then once they stop, they just can't, or once they start, they just can't stop. Like it creates a binge, it creates a, it's like a downward spiral for them.
For sure. Yeah, no, pizza is my gateway drug. For sure. So
good.
Obviously you and I have had other conversations about this, Coach Kelsey. So we have learned, and I'm not shy to say I'm an abstainer. I'm one of those people who I have to be on the train tracks because I don't do well with open roads.
Right.
So that is definitely me. But for those listening here, how can they know if they're one or the other? What might be some of the indicating factors for them?
Sure. So I want to start with an abstainer and describe that, because there are a few things in moderators that everybody wants to have this moderating personality, because it means you can eat pizza. It means you can eat chocolate chip cookies. It means you can eat all these things without downward spiraling. But an abstainer, so we're all familiar with like a Whole30, right? Like that's pretty common vernacular, right?
Sure.
So when an abstainer hears the term Whole30, they get excited. They're like, okay, like I have clear guidelines for 30 days. I can do this.
Yeah.
They aren't tempted when things are declared as off limits. And limits can be a Whole30. It can be a different freezer or a different drawer or something like that. Very clear limits, off limits. But then the other thing, and this is the hallmark of an abstainer, and if this is you, then do not flirt with the idea of being a moderator, because you will be disappointed. But the other one is, if you have trouble stopping eating once you start something, and this is, again, trigger foods. So we're not talking about like kale or some
very few of us have
berries,
stopping
right?
with kale.
Right. But if you start in with the chocolate chip cookies,
a classic kale binge.
So
That's right.
good.
I'll tell you what, when that kale drawer opens out of the fridge, I'm in trouble.
You hear like the rustling of the kale bag and just come running. So,
anyway, I'm sorry. I apologize for interrupting.
Oh, that's okay.
Go ahead.
Well, I just want to be clear, because sometimes, again,
No, for sure. No, we were just having fun.
Well, abstainers, we look for loopholes. And I know this because I am an abstainer, and I have tried to be a moderator for so much, and I just had to give up and accept it. But once you start eating the pizza or the chocolate chip cookies or the ice cream or whatever it is, you can't stop. And you're more likely to be like, well, if I eat it all tonight, then it's not going to be there tomorrow to tempt me.
Yep.
So these are thoughts that an abstainer has, and that's what makes you an abstainer. Now, a moderator on the other side. Okay, so let's go back to our Whole30 example. So if I say, let's do a Whole30, a moderator is like pump the brakes. Like, I can't have sugar for 30 days.
Sure.
Like that is, they get very panicky about those guidelines. And they find that occasionally eating a bar of chocolate or a couple pieces of chocolate, or having that chocolate chip cookie, or doing pizza on the weekends, it heightens their pleasure, but it also strengthens their resolve. So, So they need that occasional indulgence to be successful. And the reason why I pulled the two apart and said, if you are an abstainer and you have trouble stopping once you start, because an abstainer will hear like that a moderator gets panicky if they have to give something up. And an abstainer will be like, well, that's me. Like, I don't want to give up chocolate chip cookies. Well, who wants to give up chocolate chip cookies?
Right.
But we have been the vernacular in the nutrition world for so long has been everything in moderation. We've been taught that to be able to be successful at moderation or at nutrition, you have to be a moderator. So we try to like pull over into this moderation lane when we have to stay in that abstainer lane.
That's good. My wife is definitively a moderator, and yeah,
My
she's
husband
one of those people that I'll use an example just from this last week. She had bought this bag of mini bagels, and she had a little cream cheese, and she was having one with her eggs and her broccoli for breakfast, and I said, I just looked at her and I went, man, I so appreciate your ability to and I literally said to her, you are an inspiration to me. And I said, I would be looking at that one bagel, and she goes, well, the serving size on the bag says it's actually 2 bagels, but I'm only eating one. And I just was like,
what?
Yeah. That would not go well with me. What do you want to say here, G?
So I want to give some appreciation as well. I think it's been a really amazing blessing that I have Caroline in my life and that she's a moderator, because it gave me an appreciation for how people can be different and how the rule set needs to be different from people. Or what Kelsey is saying, right? So I'm definitively an abstainer, and some of you guys will be hearing this like abstainer. You may be associating that with maybe a pattern of like binge eating behavior, and it could be that, or it could be like once you start, you can't stop. It's like the one drink becomes 10, becomes eating out at IHOP after hours. It becomes the next day you eat whatever. It could be that. And I don't notice that, so that's always been the case for me. For me, what it is I honestly feel like it takes less energy as an abstainer. It takes less energy for me just to say, I will not drink that thing, I will not eat that thing, than it does for me to try and track, well, when did I have it last? Has it been long enough? Is it moderation if I have some today and then not again for 2 weeks? Like all that gray area, to me, in my head, it manifests as 11 decisions instead of one.
Sure.
And I'd rather have just the one decision. So it's psychologically less burden, emotionally less exhausting to just say yay or nay to something as an abstainer.
Yeah.
But for the longest time, I did not appropriately appreciate that for some people, the very idea of complete yes or complete no is psychologically very frightening. It's a whole different thing. And Caroline is one, and it'd be very difficult for her to live with the idea of leaving this thing behind forever. And the very notion of such a thing can be so unattractive that it makes the whole idea of eating in a healthier way seem unattractive.
Sure.
And so the baby gets tossed out with the bathwater, and a person who's a moderator may not want to have anything to do with nutrition change if it's so black and white and doesn't allow for more freestyle to live life a certain way. Do you know what I mean?
For sure. And I'm going to just interject something here on that, because I think as an abstainer myself, as someone who I have typically, and I'm going to honor what you just said there, G, I have looked at it like I have to abstain because of weakness. And I think that's a vastly different conversation point. Abstaining because of weakness means that's more like you need to be an eliminator for a time period, a period of time. But what you're saying is the abstaining actually simplifies your decision fatigue. And there's a huge thing there that happens, and we can talk about that, I'm sure, for a minute. But by the end of the day, after I have talked with a dozen different people about a dozen different topics and have done this business thing and done that, by the end of the day, my resilience, and then walked into my children at the end of the day who need daddy's full 100% engagement. By the end of the day, my resilience is super low. So if I'm offered a choice at that point, my resilience is low. And if I say, hey, that one cookie, it is easy for that to become a sleeve of Oreos rather than 2 Oreos.
Sure.
That then makes me feel like I'm a weak person.
Right.
But what's really happened is I have low decision resilience there. And so to abstain allows me to not have to use any decision fatigue at that point.
Right.
Correct.
I remember Steve Jobs when he was alive. He always wore the same outfit every day because he said, "I don't want to have to think about it."
Right.
Because that's
Right.
one more decision I have to make. And so, in a way, he was kind of a clothes abstainer.
Yeah. Well, and
Correct.
being an abstainer and moderator will bleed into other areas of your life too. So, and I think that you could probably, G, I know we asked this on the nutrition intake form. Now you could probably look at to see who's an abstainer and who's a moderator, and just notice how that works with their gym life. You know, being an abstainer with nutrition also means that if I can't work out my target of 4 days a week, I'm not really sure why I'm trying to work out 2 days a week. Like it's that like it has to be all, or I have to default to nothing. Otherwise, it's just too much. Versus a moderator is happy to be like, okay, like this week is just not going to work for 4 times, but I'm happy to go 2, and that's great. And it's interesting because we abstainers and moderators view each other a certain way, right? Like moderators think abstainers lack willpower, and abstainers think moderators aren't committed enough. So we all have this lens that we see each other. So understanding each other's personality on here, I tell you what, like it probably has saved my marriage, because I remember before I had even heard the term abstainer or moderator, my husband and I had each been gifted with, well, we got an Easter basket from his stepmom, and they had 2 chocolate bars. So he took one and I took one, and I had one piece of chocolate. And then I obsessed over it because I knew that chocolate bar was there, and I ate the rest of it because I'm like, if I eat it now, I don't have to eat it tomorrow. Versus my husband, who took one piece of chocolate and then put it away and didn't eat it the next day and didn't eat it the next day and it was like a week. And I'm like, clearly he is not going to eat this thing. So I ate it all. And then like 2 days later, he was like, do you know what happened to that chocolate bar? And I was like, yeah, I ate it. And it was like, we had a literal fight about this, like argument, full blown. And I didn't understand why he thought it was just like, what is wrong with you? And he's like, what is wrong with you? So anyway, understanding how this bleeds over and understanding the lens that we see each other is huge in making success in our life, but also in our relationships.
I gotta say, I really appreciate you bringing this up, Kelsey, because until just now when you mentioned that it bleeds to other areas of life, I had never really come to that realization. And so I can see the parallels in other things that I do and other things that people in my life who are known moderators, how they live their lives. It allows me to be more empathetic, I think, to different personality types. But I think maybe one of the greatest values to this is the clarity that can give you about yourself if you're looking to start a nutrition program, right? Like if you're hearing this conversation, you're like, holy smokes, abstainer, that is me. It simplifies what you have to do to succeed with healthy eating. If you're a moderator, maybe for you, it takes some of the pressure off. Maybe it changes your perception of how restrictive this has to be. Maybe it changes how approachable healthy eating is for you.
Right.
And for us as coaches to know that allows us to direct our efforts accordingly. For a while, I just didn't understand it when somebody would come to me and they're like, I just want you to know I rebel against authority. That's just me. And if you give me rules, my instinct is going to be to try and break them. And I didn't understand that until moderators and abstainers came along. And I realized that for some people, those bright lines hurt their eyes. They don't like the glare.
That's a great way to say it.
Well, and interestingly enough, there's another Gretchen Rubin quiz that's called the 4 tendencies. And one of the tendencies we can have, and this is the tendencies describe how we respond to both internal and external expectations. And one of the tendencies is a rebel, where they reject both internal and external tendencies, and they struggle. And nobody really enjoys being around a rebel unless you're like rioting or something like that. But like they are exhausting. And she goes through all the different ones. So I would suggest too, for you guys and anybody listening, is to look up Gretchen Rubin's 4 tendencies, because that is also very helpful in understanding how to make changes and meet expectations.
For sure. I'm going to go ahead, since we keep mentioning her, I'm going to go ahead and mention that you can actually take that quiz at her website, which is coming up here on the, for those of you joining us visually, it's GretchenRubin.com, Rubin, but she's got the 4 tendencies on there. You can obviously read more in her blog and in her various courses. So that definitely is something to consider. Coach Kelsey, let me ask you this too. We both of you have kind of been circling around this question already, which is, how ignoring or overlooking this concept could affect our success or failure, nutritionally or in life in general. Do you have any more to say about the ignoring? You know, we often say you ignore to your own peril, but how could ignoring or overlooking the concept of abstainer versus moderator affect success or failure?
So to speak personally from an abstainer perspective, who tried for a very long time to be a moderator, the consequence of that is endless guilt and shame, because here's what would happen. I would be like, okay, I've done this nutrition protocol. I'm going to bring in some off-plan foods and I'm going to moderate them. And I couldn't. And I would end up like going to the grocery store and getting a box of cookies and shoving them in my face on the drive home and throwing it away so nobody would know. And that's not what was intended for our lives. So so much guilt and shame there from an abstainer perspective. And from what I've learned from moderators in my life and in my coaching practice is frustration, just like an constant uphill battle and unhappiness in trying to be an abstainer when you really should be including some foods that give you that sense of freedom.
That's really good. G, you got anything you want to add to that?
I don't know if I could put it any more articulately than Kelsey just did, but nobody wants to feel like they're being put in a box where they don't feel like they don't belong. And chances are the people that are hearing this, there's probably either like abstainer or moderator. You probably resonate with one of these. And if you do, then knowing that allows you to move forward without frustration and guilt. It also lets your coach know how to direct you so it doesn't become exhausting and frustrating for your coach as well.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's an interest. We don't often, for those of you listening or watching, we don't often just kind of throw this out, but we're going to be posting this on, our social media at CrossFit Edwardsville, places like that. I'd be interested to know in the comments if you're an abstainer or a moderator, and really kind of some of the struggles you deal with in regard to that. So let us know in the comments, or if you're watching the video version on YouTube here, let us know in those comments as well. I'm an abstainer, I'm a moderator. I mean, we kind of have determined that we've got 3 abstainers on this call, so we'd love to hear from some moderators here. Obviously, we probably should all bring our spouses on for a part 2 of this. Get their opinion on things.
Don't you think that's interesting? I wonder if there is something to the idea that maybe abstainers and moderators are drawn to each other. You know how opposites attract. You've heard that truism before. And for all of us, we're all married, and our average client at CFE is also married, has kids, working professional. Family nutrition is one of the more complex puzzles to solve. If you want to eat healthy, figuring out how to do that dance with the people that you live with, that is one of the things you have to learn. It's a skill set you have to develop if you're going to eat in a healthy way long term, because it is damn near impossible to eat in a healthy way if your spouse is eating completely different than you, right? Again, like knowing about this, being empathetic, understanding is your spouse an abstainer or a moderator, so you can recognize that they may have to play a different game than you. But I'd love to know what percentage of our married CrossFitters are married to somebody that's the opposite profile.
Yeah, that was a question I was going to ask for both of you. Like, what percentage would you say of even your clients are abstainer versus moderator? Kelsey, how do you kind of see
Very
that
high.
breakdown?
Yeah, it's almost always the opposite. And I don't know, like I think G pointed out, opposites attract. So I would agree with that. I don't know the exact psychological equation behind that, but it's very high to be the opposite.
All right. G, what about you? Do you kind of see that same, you see a pretty good dichotomy between the percentages?
I had never paid attention to whether spouses or abstainers, moderators before today. Again, like this has been kind of been illuminating for me.
Yeah.
I will say that I do feel that, at least in my own practice, when I'm talking with people about nutrition, I think I meet a lot more abstainers than I do moderators.
Mm.
And I want to be very careful as I describe this, because I do think that if I'm an abstainer, the way that I talk about nutrition is probably going to be more likely to draw people that are abstainers, just by my perspective, the rules that worked for me. When I talk about, here's how I cracked the genetic code, and here's how I got to 4.6% body fat without using any kind of drugs or like cheating or taking some kind of illegal hormone thing, right? Like when I talk about what works for me on nutrition, I'm speaking as an abstainer. And so people that resonate with that, they're like, I want Coach G to be my coach. I want Kelsey to be my coach. They may be more likely to be abstainers.
Mm-hmm.
So I see more abstainers when I do this, but we still have moderators too. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure that my sample size is necessarily representative of the whole, if you know what I mean.
Sure.
Possibly, but I would say too that I started incorporating this into my practice a couple of years ago, and again, I don't have like this massive practice, but I would say over 2/3 of the people I work with are abstainers. And I think it's because abstainers struggle with a current nutritional guidelines, like official ones, because they feel like they are broken because they can't moderate, and they feel like they need to go get coaching because they need someone to help them figure out how to moderate and how to eat in moderation. So I don't know that your results would necessarily be skewed. I'm sure it has some bearing on it, but I think that the people who are attracted to nutrition coaching are the people who are abstainers. Not always, right? But maybe more than 50%.
Yeah.
Do you think that without coaching, that moderators might be more likely to succeed because they can actually stop after one piece of chocolate and then not eat it for 2 weeks? Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like they actually have that fail safe built in, you know?
Maybe sometimes, because the downfall with moderators is that, so there's a great quote by Oscar Wilde that goes, everything in moderation, including moderation. So, moderators can fall into the trap of over moderating. And I know that it's it's not really well accepted right now, but there are such things as bad food that is literally bad for us. And I know we want to go into this no such thing as bad food things, but it is true. So moderators can find themselves on this path of like, I've over moderated and now I need to come back. So I think there is more of a fail safe, but I think that moderators, it doesn't trigger as quickly as an abstainer, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I get that. I have been known to say that I am not a big believer in moderation, just because of my perspective. Like, I feel like there's not a lot of solid data, not a lot of good scientific evidence that's in favor or that would support the idea of moderation, because most of the scientific data is we have this population that drinks,
right,
this population that doesn't drink.
Right.
What's the long-term longevity consequences of that?
Right.
We have this group that's on a calorie-restricted diet, this group that's not. It's like it has to be, for data-wise, it has to be almost like black and white, so you can make a legitimate apples-to-apples comparison, right? So from that perspective, I think that by very definition, you can't have as good a data about moderators' long-term success. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And because of that, I've always been, again, I've said, I believe that the idea of moderation for many people, especially if you're an abstainer, the idea of moderation is actively harmful to you.
I agree. And the moderation, the issue too with our society with moderation is that we have such access to these foods. I remember when my son was really little and I was really stressing about birthday parties and what are we going to feed him when we go to birthday parties? Because the problem was back then pre-COVID, every weekend was a birthday party, was a family get together, was an event at the park, was this and that, it was playgroup. And it is not moderation if every other day you have a reason to eat a cupcake. So,
right.
So when we even say moderation in our modern world, it probably doesn't mean what moderation should actually mean.
Sure.
That's
the problem with moderation is that there is no definition, right? Essentially, it's, again, I don't want to put down moderators for sure, right? I just like, without a definition for what is moderation, essentially it is an escape clause to do whatever you want at whatever frequency you feel like. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it definitely can be. Dallas, were you gonna jump in on that? I don't want to.
No. I'm actually sitting back and enjoying this. I do think we need to have a moderator on one of these conversations for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Just simply because I think that would be a really intriguing thing. For me, I do think, Kelsey, I'm going to just echo what you said a few minutes ago, which is I think nutrition coaching appeals to the person who has told themselves a story, whether true or not. They've told themselves a story. I don't have will. I don't have discipline. I now need a coach to help me do this, versus really, how do we leverage as a coach, how do we leverage, whether you're a moderator or whether you're an abstainer, how do I help you leverage your natural inclination to get the success that you desire? And I so many stories that you said here, Kelsey. I've been the guy who's been like, I'll throw the box away so nobody knows that was me. I'll do that. I'm so weak. Oh, now we made the cookies and now I'm laying in bed at 3 a.m. and the cookies are calling me from the other rooms. I'm totally that guy. So I know I'm an abstainer, versus my wife. I love her to death, but man, we've had to throw cookies away if I make them specifically for her, if they're not ones that I'm eating or I'm not eating them. I'm like, hey, honey, these have gone stale. She's like, all right, throw them out. I don't get it. However, I do know, as a coach of Christian dads, I'm not a nutrition coach. I tell them to call G when that comes up. But for me,
I tell them to call Kelsey.
Right. But
I
for
answer
me,
their phone call.
I still have to say to those men, how do I leverage who you are to get the results you want? And I think that's a really good coaching thing for all of us.
Yeah. And I think that is such an important point, is who are you? Figure that out, and then we can build a plan. And G, you mentioned that you didn't want to beat up on moderators, and I'm not a moderator. So I hope that's not how this is coming off, but it is about recognizing how being a moderator can be a downfall. Because I tell you, as an abstainer, and most of my abstainer clients are like, why can't I just be a moderator? What can I do to become a moderator? And it's like, well, this is who you are. So we have to work within that. And being a moderator is kind of put up on this pedestal of it's so much easier, but it's not, because again, the world we live in, you can get food that will make you sick and miserable at every single gas station in the entire United States. So it's not necessarily easier. They just need to recognize that it can potentially trip them up.
Yep. And I think it's beautiful. It's a really cool thing that we have people that have these different personalities and archetypes. So it makes life more interesting.
For sure.
Probably a lot more fun for all of us being married to moderators. And it's once we know what we're dealing with anyway.
Right.
Well,
exactly.
And I do know in conversations with my wife, there have been times where she has definitely said, well, I wish I could get fired up about stuff like you do. So for her, the other side of it is she's a moderator, but at the same time, there's times where she wishes she could access the ability to throw logs on the fire, like not to burn it down, but to stoke the fire, so to speak, so that she could leverage that other side of it, leverage that. I don't want this to sound like a bad word. Leverage that extremism that I can leverage in my life. So I think the opposite side of that is for the moderator, for them to think, how can I leverage my consistency to fire up my life in a way that we're saying, as all of us being abstainers here, how can I leverage my extreme nature to fire it up? So I think anything that we can do as coaches in general, whether any area, to leverage those strengths is very key and important.
Kelsey, do you feel like abstainers tend to hang out more with extremes, generally speaking?
What do you mean?
Like, do you feel like abstainers just generally are more likely to live life in extremes of many things, not just food?
Yeah, I do. I think that it does definitely bleed over to other areas of our life. So whether that is religion, politics, fitness, um, career, like working, I think it does. I think I do see it bleeding over for sure.
I ask because like, if that's the case, then maybe it makes more sense that people that do CrossFit more likely to be abstainers because CrossFitters are, by definition, at least most of them tend to be the kind of people that are drawn to dramatic extremes of challenge or fitness or whatever. You know what I mean? So maybe part of what the reason that we see more abstainers is because that's the population that is hanging out here at CrossFit Edwardsville.
Yeah. And I would be interested if it's a different fitness modality. Do you have different people? So, like, I was super into CrossFit and I still like that extreme of lifting heavy, slamming weights, and all that sort of stuff. And my husband is always naturally veered more towards like yoga and those like running and those calmer things. And
my wife too.
Yeah, so I would definitely believe if somebody came back and was like, this is a fact, I would be like, I believe it.
I feel like I'm going to have to assign you both some homework here, and we're going to have to do a part 2 of this where we actually see some social numbers on things like that. I feel like we need to find that data.
We need to get Gretchen Rubin on a podcast.
That's true.
Yeah, that would be baller. And again, I haven't done it yet. Major shout out to Gretchen Rubin for actually codifying this in a way that Kelsey and I could understand. It's definitely contributed to my understanding of people and my ability to empathetically and effectively coach people on how to win when it comes to healthy eating.
Yeah.
An abstainer cannot play a moderator game, and a moderator cannot play an abstainer game. It's totally different.
2 very different ways to approach them, for sure.
Well, and I'm gonna again mention Gretchen Rubin here, everybody. And if you are listening to this, whether it's on YouTube or whether you're listening just to audio version, and you can get Gretchen Rubin to have a conversation with us, we definitely want to talk to her. So we're gonna put that out there for you all who are connected to find a way to get her to come and talk with us, because these are definite conversation points we'd love to have with her. I feel like we've had the banner up for her website more than the banner for our own website. So I gotta throw that up just simply because I'm the plug man every now and again. CrossFitEdwardsville.com. Obviously, everybody, you can learn a little bit more about our community. You can learn a little bit more about that. We've got ebooks there for you. Obviously, there's a lot of abstainers in the coaching squad here, but we do have a few of the other side of it. Caroline is a moderator as well, Coach Caroline. And then I'd probably say, I think probably Coach Sean is a moderator.
I believe that.
Yeah, I mean, he's not here to defend himself, but I'd definitely throw him on that conversation point. But again, everybody, if you want to connect with us, go to CrossFitEdwardsville.com, or you can also connect with us online, Instagram and Facebook at CrossFit Edwardsville. I think everybody, Coach Kelsey, Coach G here, I think we've got a pretty good idea of what we've been talking about today. So is there anything else on this particular topic right now, without all the data and without having Gretchen on here with us, that either of you would like to say to wrap this up? Because I do have a fun kind of question for you too here at the end.
So the only thing I would point out to wrap it up, if you just search Gretchen Rubin abstainer moderator, it'll give you a full article to read. And the abstain, like if you identify with you have trouble stopping once starting, you're done. You're an abstainer. Because again, I see a lot of abstainers who are like, I'm pretty sure I'm an abstainer, but I'm also a moderator because I get panicky, and it's like that's different. So just remember the panicky means like even if you just put it down for like 21 days, you have to give up sugar, and that makes you panicky instead of like, oh, those are good guardrails. I think it's worded a little bit off on the article, or a little bit unclear.
Sure, for sure. Coach G, anything that you want to add here at the end?
Nope.
All right. Well, so I'm going to ask you guys both a fun question real fast before we get out of here. This was a really helpful conversation. Again, coming from someone in the abstainer aisle on that side. It feels like we were talking about like Democrats and Republicans. Can they even speak the same language? But for me, this was actually a really enlightening conversation, specifically because I just want to say this again. You made me feel better about like, oh, this isn't a sign of weakness. This isn't a sign of lack of discipline. Yes, I have those moments of weakness and lack of discipline, but I don't have to beat myself up for someone I naturally am.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And,
really
and you don't have to play a game that's not made for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think those are both really good key takeaways, everybody. So just one last question for you all, just for the two of you here. What's kind of for you, and it could be around, abstaining or moderation, what's an unusual habit or an absurd thing that you do that you just love?
You want to go first, Kelsey?
No, you go.
All right. So for me, it's the ice cold shower first thing in the morning. I wake up, go use the bathroom, wash my hands, put my contacts in, and then turn the shower as cold as possible. And I jump in there for 200 breaths. And I didn't start there, but built my way up to it. But I tell you what, like nothing will basically make your body feel completely awake, completely alert. Like I feel physically and psychologically reset. I feel like it almost like it supercharges my wits and my awareness. And it's an awesome way to go from zero to fully ready for my day in a couple of minutes. It's pretty cool. So
are you using the Wim Hof method of breathing there when you do that, G? Is that what you're doing?
So I'm not sure because I've never actually studied the Wim Hof method of breathing, but I have noticed just by experience, there's a specific way of breathing that makes things go well when you have cold exposure, right? And for anybody who's interested, right, there's a lot of great data on how cold exposure and how like contrast baths and ice baths can positively contribute to your physical well-being, to your immune strength, the strength of your immune system.
Sure.
Right. And I have been wonderfully pleased that I have a really, really wonderful last couple of years since I started doing this. I've been, knock on wood, able to avoid illness really, really well. And I credit a lot of that to the cold exposure of the ice shower in the morning. So
nice. Coach Kelsey, what about you? Do you have kind of an absurd habit or a fun habit or fun thing you do that we'd go, oh, that's unusual, but possibly powerful?
So I, over the last couple of months, I've been doing the Waking Up app by Sam Harris. It's a meditation app.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's amazing and highly recommend it. But one of the things he taught me was, taught everybody, not just me, was to pull up a feeling that makes you angry or anxious. Like think of somebody or think of a situation, and then just step back like you're stepping away from your body and watch it, and watch that like dissipate and feel it dissipate. And then think of something that makes you happy, like your kids smiling or your kids finally falling asleep or whatever it is. And then watch that just kind of, and just step back and feel it sort of dissipate. And being somebody who kind of lives in the extremes when I get worked up, it's been very powerful to kind of pull me back and reduce that like craziness when I get anxious or mad, which the last year has been 100% riddled with anxiety and anger. Sure. So it's been very, very powerful. And I didn't like it at first because like making myself think of these things was uncomfortable, but it's become a practice that I've tried to do every single day to just practice reducing that like high, spike in feelings.
Yeah, that's it's actually a form of cognitive behavioral therapy that a lot of therapists will walk people through too. Or you're going to say,
I was going to ask. Yeah, I just want to ask a question on that because I find this fascinating. Like, do you think what it's doing is it's training you to be in the presence of that thing that tends to make you really mad? It tends to trigger you, and it is like almost like a intentionally training not to react to it.
I think it is intentional training, right? It is intentionally training you to sort of step back and realize that having to be wrapped up in those feelings is an illusion. Like you can step back and let that feeling process without acting on it. And you know, besides the day and a half of the week that I work, I'm home with my kids, and I get so, like, I don't want to be a yelling parent, right? And to be able to moderate that, like I do that a lot when my son gets like up here, right? Rather than me coming up here, I take the breath and I just sit back and I just watch the anger or the anxiety around it just disappear. Evaporate.
It frees you from the power that those negative things might have had over you, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah,
I think it's actually considered a form of exposure therapy when you actually do that. So and they deal
kind of like taking a cold shower.
Yeah, right.
Sure.
For me, one of my habits that I do is called earthing, and it's just walking barefoot in the earth, and it dissipates free radicals that have been built up in your body, and there's something very calming about just walking, pacing in grass. Or standing still in grass for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes if you can. It's very calming. So that's a fave for me. So thank you, Coach Kelsey. Really appreciate you being on here. Appreciate your time. We honor you. And this was a really powerful conversation. So thank you.
I think so. Well, thank you for having me. It's always super fun.
Yeah, awesome. Coach G-Skell, as always, we appreciate you. We appreciate what you're doing there at CrossFit Edwardsville. So thanks.
Thank you, sir.
I guess I should say here at CrossFit Edwardsville, because that's where we are, everybody. Again, you can follow us on Instagram, on Facebook at CrossFit Edwardsville. Check out our website, CrossFitEdwardsville.com. Thank you for taking the time with us. We're so grateful that you were here with us today. And like we always like to say, go out there and have a championship day.